Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So yesterday I did my Metro Division standing predictions. Feel free to go watch that video. And today we have my Atlantic Division predictions, which in my opinion, and in most people's opinion, is the best division in the entire NHL. Stanley Cup champion last year was from the Atlantic Division. 2 years ago, the Boston Bruins set the goddamn points record. And even the worst team in the division last year in the Montreal Canadians went out and traded for a 26-year-old former 40-goal scorer. Basically, all of these teams outside of the Montreal Canadiens have like playoff expectations, and like 4 of them have legit Stanley Cup aspirations. This division is going to be absolute war. So let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. We're going to go 8th all the way up to 1st. Am I going to put the Ottawa Senators into the playoffs after I hyped them up basically for the last year? We shall see. But up first, we have the Detroit Red Wings. I have them at a 36-39-7 record, good for 79 points. And I know they had 90 points last year, but I think this team is kind of primed for some regression when looking at them last season. They led the entire NHL in goals scored above expected. They shot the shit out of the puck, and that is not very sustainable. You look at predictions last year, I was big on the Seattle Kraken regressing because they had 34 goals scored above expected last season. I predicted them to have like 85 points. Everybody called me absolutely crazy. They ended up falling off a decent amount. I think this could happen with the Detroit Red Wings in terms of that. The defense core is just not that good on top of that. Outside of Mort Seider, they traded away Jake Wallman in a second-round pick, dumped away Jake Wallman. Unless Simon Edvinsson can come in and be a legit, very good second-pair guy right off the rip, they're not going to have that good a defense core with guys like Ben Sherratt, Justin Hall, Eric Gustafsson, Jeff Petrie. It's just not a good defensive unit. In the goaltending, although Cam Talbot was pretty good on a LA Kings team last year that was very good defensively and did kind of help him out, their goalie tandem is a 3-man circus of Cam Talbot, Alex Lyon, and Ville Husso. I don't have that much trust in it. I think the top 6 is good. The top 6 is objectively good, assuming that Kane and Tarasenko don't fall off, which I think they still can be high-level guys. The top 6 is good, but I'm not sure they're going to have as good of a goal-scoring year as compared to last year, especially when you consider they don't have as much internal growth candidates as the Montreal Canadiens, as the Ottawa Senators, as the Buffalo Sabres, outside of Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, and I guess Simon Edvinsson inserting him to his lineup. There's not a ton of internal growth, and again, going back to Lucas Raymond, the dude shot 19% last season. I'm just not that high on the Detroit Red Wings, but if you've been following this page for the last month or two, you clearly know that's the case, and as a result, I have them in 8th. In 7th, I have the Montreal Canadiens, not that much higher than the Detroit Red Wings. I have them at 35-37-10, good for 80 points. When looking at it, this was a 76-point team last year. You add Patrick Laine, who I think probably going to be sniffing around 30-30. I'm not sure he's going to be right off the rip, getting back to his 40-goal pace back in his early Winnipeg Jets days. But he's definitely a very solid add on top of Kirby Dach playing a full season. Hopefully, he can be a 55 to 60-point guy for the Detroit Red Wings. Lane Hudson, I know it's only the preseason, but he has looked very good at the NHL level. The D-core is pretty slacking. That's definitely a weakness, as well as the goalie tandem is pretty young and inexperienced, so I can't say that's really a plus. But I think this top 6 is going to be pretty solid for the Montreal Canadiens, and guys like Lane Hudson, Kirby Dach, and Patrick Laine will make this a better team heading into next season. Slafkovsky should take a step. Hopefully Alex Newhook, Cole Caulfield shot like, talk about a reverse regression candidate, a progression candidate. Cole Caulfield shot like 9% last year, still had what, like 27, 28 goals. I think he's going to have a very solid season. So for the Montreal Canadiens, they take a step. They're not going to be actually contending for a playoff spot, but they take a solid step next season, and then the year after. I think next summer is when they go really aggressive and try to make the playoffs. In 6th, I have the Buffalo Sabres. This team could stink. This team could be absolutely fantastic. They're the biggest wild card because their team is so goddamn young. If all of their players take serious steps, we're talking Bowen Byram, we're talking Owen Power, Peterka, Quinn, Cousins, Benson, like they have so many young guys, but I just feel like they're too inexperienced. So as a result, I didn't say the record at first. I have them at 40-33-9, good for 89 points. I think they're going to get back in the playoff race after having a pretty disappointing season last year, but I can't quite pick this team yet because they're just not that proven. UPL, if he plays like he did in the calendar year of 2024, they could definitely be a playoff team. There's just too much uncertainty with the Buffalo Sabres, so this prediction could age absolutely horrible, but again, this team is just so volatile. I think they're by far the most volatile team heading into next season, and as a result, I cannot have the most faith in them. In 5th, this is when we start getting a little bit controversial. Yesterday's predictions were a little bit straightforward. going with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I had the Tampa Bay Lightning in 5th with a 41-29-12 record, good for 95 points, not making the playoffs. For the Tampa Bay Lightning, they have the star power. There's no doubt, and I like them swapping Stamkos or Gensel in for Stamkos at only $1 million more, but this team has so much star power. The depth really concerns me. If they have one injury, things could fall apart pretty easily, and it's not even like they've been a consistent playoff team the last 2 years, only clocking in at 98 points, and I know last year they were kind of locked into that first wild card for like the last 2 months of the season, but I think that things could go wrong with this Tampa Bay Lightning team. They're only a year older at this point. The power play was by far the best in the NHL, and I think it's going to be very good, but they were very reliant on their special teams last year. Their underlying numbers in terms of 5-on-5 were like middle of the pack in the NHL. You look at a guy like Vasilevsky, I think he's going to be a little bit better, but coming off lumbar disc herniation, that is such a serious injury for goaltenders. I'm just not as high on this team. I love their top 5 forwards, but after that, it's pretty disappointing. Victor Hedman has fallen off defensively in prior years. Ryan McDonough was very good for the Predators last year, but he's like 34, 35 at this point. This team is old and very shallow and has been injury prone in prior years, especially a guy like Nikita Kucherov. So when looking at that, I'm not that high in the Tampa Bay Lightning. Definitely going to be in the playoff race. This could age horribly because in 4th, I got the Ottawa Senators. I feel like I've just hyped up this team and hyped up this fan base far too much. This season, I'm not going with a 102-point season for the Ottawa Senators. I have them just barely making the playoffs with a 43-29-10 record, good for 96 points. And when looking at the Ottawa Senators, I feel like there's a misconception around this team that their defense core was bad last season. And although they did swap out Chychrun for Jensen, which I think is a little bit of a downgrade, still, last year, they ranked 11th in the NHL and expected goals against per 60. It was really the goaltending that just absolutely crapped the bed. I don't think people realize how big this ad of Linus Ullmark, even if he's not as good as he's been the last 3 years for the Boston Bruins, even if he's just a 9-10 for this team, they are going to be a very, very good defensive team heading into next season. And on top of that, there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of this team, especially the special teams. I think Travis Green can turn those around into at least league average. When looking at it last year, they had the 4th worst penalty kill in the NHL, 10th worst power play. I expect those to get at least to league average, and I think the power play could end up being top 10 in the entire NHL. And when looking at guys in terms of internal growth, I think Tim Stützle is going to get back on track. Jake Sanderson's going to really emerge as that number 1 center for the Ottawa Senators. Guys like Shane Pinto and Ridley Gregg are going to be massive for this team as middle sixers, and very, very good middle sixers, the kind of middle sixers that the Tampa Bay Lightning kind of lack for the most part. It's really going to come. The main X factor with this team is obviously Josh Norris in his shoulder. The guy's making $8 million. He needs to be good to go. He has been practicing, hasn't appeared in a preseason game. He needs to get back to at least 55, 60 points for this team to be a playoff team. It's all hinging on that, in my opinion. I think David Perron was a good add within their forward core, but I think that this team, as long as Ullmark is as expected, this defense core is not the end of the world. They still have one very good offensive defenseman in Shabbat, one very good defensive defenseman in Zub, and then Sanderson's just that two-way guy. I think Jensen can be a capable number 4. I think that this team, again, we say about the rebuild being over. I think they definitely, at the bare minimum, take a step towards being an 88, 89-point team and actually play meaningful games come early April. But in my opinion, I have them making the playoffs. In 3rd, I got the Florida Panthers. In terms of like actual contenders, I feel like they would probably be my pick to make the Eastern Conference Finals out of the Atlantic. But in the regular season, coming off back-to-back seasons of making the Stanley Cup Final, I just don't really think that they're going to have the juice in the regular season. That defense core is kind of shallow. I really like Gustav Forsling. Aaron Ekblad, I think he's kind of overrated, and he's been a massive injury liability the last couple seasons. So when looking at that, don't think that they're going to have quite a division-winning season this year, but I have them at 103 points. 2nd in the division, we got the Boston Bruins. They are a big and scary team, especially that defense core. I have them with a 48, 25, and 9 record. Good for 105 points. Their defense core, again, big, scary. Carlos 6'6", Zadorov 6'6", Lorai 6'5", Lindholm 6'4", Andrew Peak 6'3", Charlie McAvoy all the way down at 6'1". The defense core is going to be great. I assume Jeremy Swayman is going to sign, and even if he doesn't sign for like a for the first couple weeks of the season. I still think they're going to be a safe playoff team. Jim Montgomery has been one of the best coaches in the NHL since he's walked in, probably the best regular season head coach in the entire NHL. So when looking at them, I don't like the bottom six, but I think the top six is good enough with guys like David Pastrnak. Obviously, he can carry the entire top six, but after adding a Lindholm, I think he's going to bounce back to around 65 to 70 points. Other guys like Marchand, Coyle, Zacha, all solid top sixers. So as a result, I think this Boston Bruins team is not going to fall off. They're going to have another solid season and safely make the playoffs, which means in first, I got the Toronto Maple Leafs. 50-25-7 record, good for 107 points. I think that this is arguably their most talented roster, most complete roster of the Austin Matthews era. When looking at it, I've said it before, I don't like the term, obviously, on the OEL and Chris Tanev contracts, but in terms of getting a legit lockdown, one of the consistent best defensemen in the entire NHL in Chris Tanev, and an actual puck-moving defenseman outside of Morgan Riley for this defense core and Oliver Ekman-Larsson makes this a pretty average to above average group versus last year in the playoffs. It was, or by the time it was the playoffs, it was pretty dog shit for the most part. In terms of that forward core, they were second in the entire NHL in goals for last year, seventh in power play. They're going to put up a shit ton of goals, especially with guys like Matty Nyes taking another step. Bobby McCann really was a solid add for that, or call up last year. He can be an effective middle sixer. Nicholas Robertson, if you can get 17 and 17 out of him, 34 points, that's going to be a very solid season. I think John Tavares is actually going to have a bounce back season, be like 70 to 75 points after having 65 points last year. Mitch Marner, contract year, he's going to really show up. In net, I think they actually have a pretty respectable tandem. When looking at them last year, Samsonov fell off a cliff at one point. Joseph Wool got hurt. They were relying on like Martin Jones to play serious games for their goddamn team. They got a veteran in Stolarz who had a 925 last year in Florida, was better on a per game basis than Sergei Bobrovsky. On top of 2 years ago, he had a 918 in Anaheim, in goddamn Anaheim when they stunk it up. So when looking at that, he can be a solid guy that can give you 30 to 35 games. And then if Joseph Wool can actually stay healthy, and even if he can, I think Stolarz can kind of step up into playing around 40, 45 games. But if Wool can stay healthy, I see no reason why, considering what he's done in both the regular season and the playoffs, that he can't give you 45 games and give you like a 9-10 save percentage. He has been very solid at basically every single level, very good at every single level that he's played at. So I don't really see any weaknesses on this team. I don't love the defense core. The goalie tandem's maybe a little bit unproven. The forward core, it's going to give you a shit ton of goals. This team has been an easy, consistent playoff team since, 2018 at this point. They're going to make the playoffs, and I think they're going to get that first year coach bump, and as a result, they're going to win the Atlantic Division. Yeah, but here's the final. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? I know the Red Wings fans are going to come after me because I apparently absolutely hate their team. I hate the Leafs way more, and I still say that they're going to win the division. Senators, sometimes you just got to go with your heart. I should make some kind of punishment if the Islanders and Senators both miss the playoffs. I should have to do something because that would be just absolutely shameful. Again, will not surprise me if the Tampa Bay Lightning make it over the Ottawa Senators. I'm not saying that the Senators are a safe playoff team, but I think they kind of put it together this season. And Buffalo is the one team where I have just absolutely no read on them. They're just so volatile. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? I'll be seeing you in the next one.